Not at all. Hope you didn't lose any of your viewers.
No, no, they're still waiting actually, because I got a message from a couple of ago, patient. Okay, we are live with Montgomery County Republican Club's Direct Line program. We are joined by Ambassador James Gilmore, and former governor of the great state of Virginia, former Attorney General, great Virginian, great American. And our hosts tonight are Mark Unkelfer and Ryan Nidak. Take it away, guys.
Well, thank you very much, Dwight. It's sorry to be a little bit late, but we were, of course, having some technical difficulties. I was joined by Ryan Nidak. Now, Ryan, are you in Virginia or are you back in Maryland?
No, I'm here in the great state of Virginia. I'm down in Blacksburg, where
So you are our cultural exchange for the couple of years that you're at Virginia Tech, and I think Virginia is much better for that. But we're also joined by former governor and ambassador, former ambassador James Gilmore, who is just back. Well, probably within the last 2 months or so. When did you come back from representing the United States in Vienna at essentially the UN agencies in Vienna at OSCE? So tell us a little bit about what you did there.
Well, actually, Mark, there are 3 ambassadors from the United States in Vienna. One, of course, is the ambassador to Austria, and that's very typical. Everybody here will understand that. That's just an ambassador to a country like London or France or Austria. The second was, in fact, the ambassador to the United Nations agencies, and it was focused mostly on nuclear issues, because the International Nuclear Regulatory Commission is headquartered in Vienna, Austria. The third ambassador was me, and I was the appointed ambassador by President Trump to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Now, there's no reason why anybody on this call ought to know anything about that, because it's just very subterranean, but it really isn't. Think about it as like the United Nations, because that's really what it is. It's centered in Europe, but it includes about everything. It includes United States and Canada across the Atlantic. It shoots out into Central Asia and takes in 4 or 5 of the former Soviet republics that are now independent, like Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. All those countries are in it. Russia is in it. Ukraine is in it. It goes all the way down through Turkey, down through the Caucasus. So it's actually got 57 countries that are located in this. Each of those countries appoints an ambassador to the OSCE. The OSCE is quite formal. It meets once a week in the Hofburg, which is the downtown palace that used to belong to the Habsburgs. And it meets there every week, and all 57 ambassadors. And it's an opportunity for the diplomats to basically take a position on behalf of their country. It's carefully crafted. Everybody communicates with their capitals. Everything that we did, we communicated with Washington, D.C. and cleared it and discussed it and went through it. Although I had a great deal of latitude as the ambassador to set policy. And then it was cleared and approved of in Washington. So we did represent the country. The organization has a secretariat. It has a secretary general, but it also has 3 other major leaders, one on behalf of the media, another on behalf of minorities, and a third one at the head of an organization called ODIHR, which is the Organization for Democracy and Human Rights. That is a big deal, and I can go into that in a little while, but this organization is very formal. It has staff, and they also have 12 field missions out in some of these countries that are intended to provide support, particularly philosophically and governmentally, to encourage people to deal with human rights, to deal with the rise of democracy. OSCE is a very prominent international organization. It does not have the notoriety that the United Nations does, because it's not in New York. And because, frankly, the UN's been famous ever since the Cuban Missile Crisis. OSCE, on the other hand, has been dealing right now with very major things. For example, the Russians, as we know, have broken the peace pretty much. They have conquered and tried to conquer the Crimea. They are occupying eastern Ukraine. They also are occupying part of Georgia. They also have troops that are situated there in Moldova. They also have been frankly threatening a lot of different people. So this is a live situation. The most recent issue, and I'll stop here in just a minute, was Armenia and Azerbaijan, who actually conducted a war in the North Caucasus. And that the U.S. mission was engaged with that. The ambassador's not alone. I had a staff there of a mission of about 35 people, most of them political. So the difference is that the OSCE ambassador is dealing almost always with geopolitics all the time. And that's why it's very important for there to be a presidential appointed ambassador to carry the weight of the United States in that organization. And I can also report to you all that the U.S. is the most prominent country in the OSCE, in my judgment.
Now, there was a fair amount of flux in the status of the U.S.-European relations during the Trump years. Certainly, the president wanted to see more participation, more vigorous participation on the part of our allies. And at the same time, we had President Putin of Russia sort of doing what he could to be able to drive a wedge between the United States and Europe. Any thoughts about that or any comments about that?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. The Russians, you could spend a lifetime trying to understand what the Russians are and what they're trying to do. The U.S. at this point focuses a lot of its attention on the Pacific and on China. And in the long run, you probably do need to be very focused on China. That is a country basically run by a political party that are gangsters. They're committing genocide against the Uyghurs. Frankly, I think they're guilty of crimes against humanity against the whole 1.3 billion Chinese people. But that ain't what we're doing at OSCE. At OSCE, we're dealing with the other issue, which is Russia. Russia is not quiet. Europe is not quiet. Europe is very tense. We think of it when we go to Europe as a nice trip down the Rhine or looking at the Eiffel Tower or going to the Tower of London and all that, London Bridge. That's not what's going on in Europe. Europe is very, very tense. War could break out there almost any time. In fact, small wars are engaged right now across the European continent. The bottom line, though, is that I want to report to you all very directly here. I met every week with what's called the Quad. That's the ambassadors from Britain, Germany, France, and the United States. We also met with dozens of other countries, and I'm not going to talk about each one now, but I want to assure the listeners that the United States is in good condition in Europe and across everywhere else too. The U.S. is still the biggest voice in the room. It has the greatest respect, and there's nothing that President Trump did that actually damaged that. We're going to be hearing a lot about that in the days ahead about how President Trump did this, and frankly, he did things in a way that I wouldn't have done. I never have behaved quite that way, but he was trying to shake up the bag, if you will. He was trying to break the existing order. And there were reasons why he was trying to do that. Mark, if you've got a minute, I'll give you one example.
Please.
There is a special mission of the OSCE in eastern Ukraine. It's a special monitoring mission. And it has people on the ground there, sometimes as many as 1,000 people, to monitor that situation and try to keep it from exploding again and becoming a general war in Europe. That organization ran out of money. When it ran out of money, the first thing they did was they came and rattled their cup and came to me as ambassador of the United States and said, how about funding this and finishing this gap? And I basically said, no. What we're going to do is the United States will contribute, but we expect all the countries, particularly within the alliance that support this type of mission, to contribute too. And they ended up doing it. All these other countries ended up contributing. They wouldn't have done that if President Trump wasn't on the record demanding that there be further participation by everybody. And the point that I made with them is this: a donation is not just a financial matter, it's a political statement. And we expect our friends and allies to stand with us if we're going to be trying to manage this crisis in Ukraine. And they did. And I think that President Trump had a lot to do with that.
Now, the Ukraine situation kind of highlights a kind of transition that's taken place. And again, we talked about before while we were waiting about the Cold War, where you had clearer, distinct lines of demarcation between the two superpowers. And now what we're seeing is a kind of low grade kind of conflict. So we've got the little green men going into the eastern Ukraine. That is Russian soldiers, but it's claimed not to be Russian soldiers, simply, local people. We see that with cybersecurity issues and the cyber attacks and what have you. These, how shall I say, initiatives or attacks that are just below the threshold of what would trigger perhaps a more conventional response, but obviously high enough that it's provocative. Any thoughts about how did the organization address those challenges? You obviously mentioned what you did in Eastern Ukraine, but how do we deal with those threats in general?
Well, I'm going to tell you, but I also ought to mention that as ambassador, we confronted the Russians every week, every day. That is the principal thing. Their pressure on Europe, their intimidation of Europe, which cannot succeed as long as the United States has a strong presence. And at the OSCE, the ambassador speaking out, a former governor, an ambassador appointed by the president, it means a lot. It pushes back the Russians and it reassures our allies. So that's one of the points. I also might make the point that we had a lot of major initiatives going on over there, all the way from trafficking in humans to military and the hybrid warfare that you're referring to, which I'll come to in just one second. President Biden fired every Republican appointee worldwide in the ambassadors, every one. So if President Biden said here saying, well, I want to be bipartisan and I want to work together with the Republicans, he did the exact opposite. When he came in, he fired every Republican ambassador. Now, I mean, I didn't like leaving because I was making great progress over there, but he fired everybody worldwide. There are no ambassadors out there right now who are political appointees. And believe me, I assure everybody on this call, it is doing very great diplomatic damage to the people of the United States. Now, with that being said, hybrid warfare is thought of as not military movements or tanks or airplanes or bombers. Usually it's thought of as cyber warfare. I would interpret it broader than that. It is cyber warfare, but it's also economic warfare. It's also propaganda and messaging. It's also all kinds of efforts to destabilize people in these countries. My message to my Russian colleagues, who I knew, by the way, quite well over there, but basically my message to them was, if keep in mind, everybody in Moscow, if you're engaged in hybrid warfare with the United States, you're engaged in warfare with the United States. And you really don't want to do that. And so we were making some progress on that, I thought. They don't even want to admit that they're engaged in hybrid warfare. They don't want to talk about it, but we were insisting that they do that. So once again, we were pushing back on Russian policy and warning them that these things can get out of hand if they continue to do it.
Now, one of the, I don't know if it's directly a part of it, but one of the challenges that has come from security challenges has been the refugee crisis. And in some respects, I know a number of people have thought that the Russians in particular had been very active in destabilizing Syria as a way of generating a humanitarian crisis and the flow into Europe, which in turn has created a lot of political turmoil in individual countries. Is that something? How do we address that? And does the United States have a role in helping with that in Europe?
No, probably not. But our role is to work with all these 57 countries. And the refugees were flowing into Europe. They were flowing into an OSCE member country. Italy was particularly affected. Greece was affected. But then, of course, refugees flowed north as well. The primary point about your question, though, is the tensions that it created within Europe, particularly within the European Union. The European Union, by the way, is a work either in progress or deterioration, depending upon how it goes from here. France and Germany are determined to keep the European Union together and to actually make it grow and make it not just economic, but more political. The problem they got was Brexit pulled one of the legs out from under that.
Right.
And so now the European Union is, I wouldn't say it's up for grabs, but its future is very much in question. The reason I'm discussing it is because the refugee issue was handled in different ways by different countries. And as a result of that, that created tensions within the European Union and then those countries that were there. The Eastern European countries, they don't really like to take orders from the EU. So they wanted to handle it in an entirely different way. They built their fences and, controlled their refugee issue much differently than, say, Germany or even France. And it's been an issue of tension and geopolitics within the European Union. Now, why is that important? It's important because Russia hates the European Union. They fear and hate NATO, but they also dislike the European Union because the European Union is a magnet for countries. And I don't think it's in the American interest to be troubled by that. If you have countries along the Eastern European periphery that used to be in Russia or in the Russian Empire, and now they're being pulled to the West, one of my policies was, in fact, to help pull them to the West. And part of that is they wanted to be in the trade union of the European Union.
So you alluded to it a little bit when you talked about Brexit, but it was certainly must have been an interesting time to be in Europe as an ambassador with Brexit going on and a lot of tension in some of these other countries as to whether to stay in the European Union or people who want. There's also people who want to leave the European Union. Can you describe kind of what that like and maybe offer some words of wisdom from somebody who is on the inside about where you see that going?
Well, let me start by saying that when I got to Europe, the first thing that I did was build a relationship with my British colleague. The United States and the United Kingdom are absolutely a rock solid alliance. And we are very close. Anything that's in dispute publicly is frankly pretty superficial. The relationship and alliance between the United States and the United Kingdom is deep. And it was a deep relationship between me and my ambassador colleague as well. We came to know each other personally. We spent personal time together. But here you go. I think the refugee crisis had a great deal to do with Brexit, with the British leaving. I think they just didn't want any part of that. But mostly Britain is a proud country with a proud history, and they just didn't want to take orders from some sort of false country that they were trying to cobble together on the European mainland. I think they wanted to have control over their own sovereignty and future. So off they went. Their future, however, is also in doubt. And the United States, I think, needs to be very supportive of the United Kingdom because they're a very key ally of ours. But all of this is, Ryan, still in the works. All this it's up in the air. And we're just talking about the Western side of things. I mean, remember that this thing runs all the way out almost to the Chinese border. And, and then in addition to that, they have correspondent countries in the Pacific and in the Mediterranean also. This is a very important, big international organization, and it is focused entirely upon security, national security, peace, and war. I would urge your viewers to go and Google the final act in the Helsinki Accords that were entered into in 1976 and understand the politics of that. The OSCE grew out of that and remains today a very substantial organization. It's about all there is to add for real peace in that very unstable continent. I'll stop by saying one more thing. I think your viewers ought to consider something. They ought to think about the importance of Europe in America's national security interests. If Europe is lost to us because they go independent or they become hostile or the Russians intimidate them, the United States is in danger. I remind everybody what happened in World War II. When the United States was engaged on two different areas, the Pacific and in the Atlantic, Franklin Roosevelt made Europe the top priority. If you lose Europe, you lose American security. You can maybe handle the Pacific, but you can't handle America's safety if you lose Europe.
Yeah, I guess thank you for that answer. To kind of transition into the second half of the program to talk about Virginia. Most of our viewers probably know that before you were ambassador, you were attorney general and then governor of Virginia. What was that transition like from being, domestic state level politics to, transitioning into a foreign policy role?
Well, first of all, the greatest job you can have in the United States that's not the president is the governor. Mm-hmm. That's true for all 50 governors. That's the creme de la creme. That's the office that you want to hold. You're the chief executive of a state, of a sovereign state of the United States. And it's a great training ground. It's a great experience. It's a great way to implement policy. You're the boss, and you have the ability to implement policy, whether it's tax cuts or whether it's transportation or education or any of those issues. That's a definite program, but not all governors have the same program. And in fact, you know that there are some governors in this country that are kind of wacky, and they got kind of wacky programs. But I think that we in Virginia did a good job. We built the Woodrow Wilson Bridge during my administration, for example, to link up Maryland and Virginia, right there near the District of Columbia. So it's a great job. Being the Attorney General is running a major law office on behalf of the Commonwealth, and you're at that point. It was a great start because you had a dual job. You were a lawyer, you were responsible to the law, to the rule of law, and to the courts, and then you're also a politician because you were elected to be Attorney General. You weren't appointed, at least in Virginia. Then when you become governor, you're the chief executive. It's a very political role, but it's also a highly policy and administrative role. So it prepares you very well for the job of being ambassador and running a mission and applying the policies of the president, the policies of the national security strategy into an organization like the OSCE. I was really lucky, to tell you the truth. I might have been appointed to go off someplace to some little country someplace and run passports somewhere. And that's not what happened at all. They put me in a highly political, highly security, war and peace, geopolitical position. And I'm very lucky. I'm glad that I had that opportunity, that the president gave me that opportunity.
Yep, definitely. So, as most of our viewers also probably know, Virginia elects their governors and their attorney generals and lieutenant governor in odd numbered years. So that means that we're, in 2021, we're up for another election for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. Can you tell us a little bit about the current state of the race in Virginia?
Well, yeah, and the answer is it's pretty chaotic. So I'll answer specifically and then generally. We've got a number of candidates that are running for governor. Kirk Cox, who's been the speaker, he's a long-term insider around the party. He knows everybody and will continue to know everybody. And he's going to be a very popular candidate. Amanda Chase is, as she describes herself, Donald Trump in heels. She's been very outspoken, very controversial, but she has the support of probably, 29, 30% of the voters in Virginia. And they won't go away, just like they're not going away from Donald Trump. Pete Snyder is a friend of mine. He's a businessman from Northern Virginia. I spent a lot of time in Alexandria, and I've gotten to know him, and I like him very much. He is out there running very, very vigorously. Glenn Youngkin used to be a very big businessman with the Carlyle Group. He's got a giant estate. Of course, so does Pete Snyder, and is in the race. Those four are really the story. And then, of course, you've got about 4 candidates for lieutenant governor, 3 candidates for attorney general. The real challenge is twofold, if I could say, Ryan. Number one, things are pretty difficult right now. There's a split in the Virginia Republican Party. Some want to have primaries, some want to have conventions. The rules, first of all, the primary date is passed, so there's not going to be a primary. There's going to be some form of a convention. But the problem is that under the COVID restrictions, you can't have a convention. So what do you do? And right now we're struggling with that. Not we, but they are struggling with that. I've listened to the State Central Committee. It's very raucous. And they're trying to figure out how they're going to do this nomination. They came up with an idea that they would have a drive-in convention where you sat in your car and listened to the information through the radio and then voted, preference balloting, first choice, second choice, third choice. Personally, I think it was kind of a gimcrack idea myself, and it isn't working. So now this coming Friday, they're going to meet again and try to figure out how they're going to do it. My guess is they may do those kinds of meetings across the districts of Virginia. It's a very big state, and then try to nominate in that way. Final thing I want to say to you is that, I think there's a real challenge right now, and that is that Virginia has changed. and it's voting Democrat right now, just like Maryland does. And we have got to make sure that our message appeals to a majority of the people of Virginia. And I'm not sure we're doing that right now. If you want to go back and take a look at the way the vote totals have gone over the last several statewide elections, just look at Fairfax County, which has a population of over 1 million people. Just look at the way they're voting Democrat and Republican, and you'll see what I mean. We have got to be thinking about how the Republican Party can put together a program that addresses the concerns of people across the state, and particularly in the suburbs. If we don't find a way to do that, it's going to be very hard for us to win.
That's a good point, and a kind of reminder of your singular campaign issue when you ran for governor was focused on the car tax, which was very unpopular, but it was also an issue that transcended the regions of Virginia. I think everybody understood that. It certainly was consistent with the Republican anti-tax message, but it resonated with really across the board.
Well, it brought people to the conservative anti-tax message. I was a conservative candidate and a conservative governor, so I set the tone. My tone wasn't climate change or any of the rest of the stuff that's going on. I was talking about tax cuts, and the fact is, I found a tax cut that I thought was going to help a lot of people if we could get that tax cut implemented. I had no idea how the people of Virginia would pick it up and run with it. It was an amazing, amazing thing. People hated that car tax and they wanted somebody that was going to get rid of it. Whether you realize it or not, that meant we were pulling the people of Virginia into a conservative approach to government. And we did, and it was successful. I might add, by the way, that it was a 5-year phase out. We got 4 years implemented over opposition from my own party. And then when I left the governorship, a Democrat came in and stopped the phase out. So there's still car tax today in Virginia that shouldn't be there. But that's the way it goes. You got one term in Virginia.
See, and I was going to pick up on that. Virginia is one of the very few states that continues to have single terms for governors. It is possible to run subsequently, and some folks do and have. But how does that change how you govern when you go into office, or do you think there's a difference when you go into office knowing from day one that you're not running for re-election, or you can't run for re-election, but on the other hand, you only have 4 years to accomplish what you want to do?
Well, I'm on record. I'm on record, Mark, saying that the governor should have an opportunity to run for a second term. I think it's better for the people of Virginia. If they like the way things are going, they can give the governor a full 8 years to implement it. If they don't like what the governor's doing, they can vote him out. But this one-term governorship, I think, distorts the way that people govern. Now, some people love it, but I'm no fan of the one-term governorship. Now, you asked me a direct question, what does it do? Well, the governor of Virginia has a lot of power, a lot of appointive power. The budget, just like the president, can make up a budget. The governor of Virginia can make up a budget. And you do have trouble with the money committees in the legislature. The governor and the legislature are always going to have trouble. The founders understood that tension was going to be there. But the bottom line is, when the governor goes in, he's just gotten the mandate of the people, and the legislature will actually accommodate almost anything he wants to do. The second year, the legislature is cordial. The third year, the legislature is less cordial.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Not cordial.
Not cordial, okay.
And in the fourth year, they're trying to kill you because they know that you're leaving. So that they can try to undo what you've done. They can try to create problems for you. I just didn't like it. I would like to have had at least the opportunity to be reelected. I think it would have created a better environment for partnership between the governor and the legislature.
And you have a short legislative session. Is it 60 days? I'm trying to remember. Forgive me, I'm a Marylander.
Yeah, 60 and 90, I believe.
Yeah.
I never counted it down. I just wanted them out of town. It's a short. They're not in session year round.
So your window of or a governor's on a single term window of opportunity is really within those few days of that first term of the legislature.
Yes, and you have to move decisively. You have to be a decisive leader, and you have to move decisively to try to create your program. Of course, the result of that, Mark, is you got to break a lot of eggs, and that's the risk that you run. Also, might add, by the way, that as I've said with President Trump, I would not have done some of the things that he did or some of the things that he said, but on quiet reflection, the president was trying to break the China. He was trying to break the crockery. He was trying to break up things and to move things in an entirely different direction. And he thought he was going to get a second term. I thought he was going to get a second term. In Virginia, you get one term. That's it. Now you can come back and run at a later time. That's very, very difficult to do. Terry McAuliffe's trying to do it right now to be the second person to ever do it, and he may be able to do it because of the way the dynamics are running right now in the voting communities, particularly in Northern Virginia. But it's very hard to do. But the point is, you got that one term, and you got to hurry. And when you do that, sometimes you ruffle some feathers and break some of the china, but you got to do it. The people elected you to do it.
So let me take an issue. You're dealing with folks from Montgomery County, and I've worked with Virginians on transportation issue, and our how shall I say, our common artery is the American Legion Bridge, and our governor has been moving very forcefully to try and get through an initiative that you guys already have, which are easy pass lanes to speed the traffic, and is to extend it into extend those paths basically into Maryland. Now, you had some experience with the bridge, the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. You got any advice for Larry Hogan about how to get the American Legion Bridge changes through? Now, there is an agreement. I should say that. I mean, it's what we're really working on is the private-public partnership on our side to kind of get that set up.
Well, I'll tell you my recollection on this. The governor of Maryland at the time, Paris Glendening, might disagree with what I'm about to say, but when I became governor, I became aware of the terrific traffic snarl-ups that were going on in Northern Virginia. I wasn't prepared to raise a lot of taxes in order to accommodate it, but there were certain things that I thought we could do. We could build that mixing the bowl area down there in Virginia that was kind of near the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and we did. We built that to accommodate the heavy traffic. But I went to the governor of Maryland and I said, look, we really need to rebuild the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. It's going to fall in the water if we don't do something with it. And furthermore, I would like to build a new bridge from Fairfax County into Montgomery County. I would like to do that in order to take some of the pressure off of the American Legion Bridge and to give people more options. And my recollection is that Governor Glendening told me he would cooperate with me fully on the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, but to never mention another bridge between Fairfax and Montgomery ever again. So I never had a partner in Maryland to work with me on that issue. And I couldn't do anything about it without a Maryland partner. But we did build the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. And that stands today, I think, as a major accomplishment for the two states.
It is, and obviously it's an important artery. One of the reasons it's so busy is that so many jobs are in our the Washington metropolitan area are gone to Virginia, and some of us end up commuting over there as a result.
Well, I think if Governor Hogan can do something on the other side over there near the American Legion Bridge, either improve that bridge or build another artery, he ought to do it. And, he ought to go see Governor Northam. I have no influence with that governor. But,
no, actually, in fairness to the governor, Virginia has been very cooperative on that issue and has pushed on it. The real impediment has been in Montgomery County in particular. As I understand it, one of the challenges is in Virginia, you guys had the foresight to have very wide right-of-ways, and so it was possible to put these express lanes in. And Maryland didn't, and as a result, there are parts farther in beyond 270 where you really are very constrained in the ability to put in additional lanes, and so that's one of the issues that's being worked through.
Well, I think that if Governor Hogan and Governor Northam can agree to move that thing forward, they ought to. Let me pause and mention, Ryan, that you only get one 4-year term as governor. You can't build a major transportation project in 4 years. Can't happen. So you have to set everything in motion, get all the agreements, do all the contracts, buy all the concrete, then you're gone. So you got to just pray that the next Virginia governor will continue with it. But transportation is a pretty consistent issue across party lines, I think, in Virginia and Maryland.
Yeah, and that's certainly, even with 2 terms, it's less of a problem, but it's still there. And that Governor Hogan's term ends in 2022, and it's up to his successor, hopefully of the same party, and will continue on that agenda, but to move the projects forward. I guess, we're approaching time here. I want to give you the opportunity to give any final thoughts or reflections, or, something we didn't cover today.
Well, just this. I think that President Trump actually, look, I don't mean to be a mouthpiece or an apologist for anybody, but I think that people should be thinking about the progress that's really been made by President Trump, and whether President Biden is going to undo a lot of these things. There's been a lot of talk, particularly in the mainstream media, about how President Trump was not tough on Russia. I can assure you that he was, because I was there implementing it. We never, ever have agreed that Russia could successfully occupy the Crimea, for example. Never agreed to that. We have been tough on him, on Russia, on all these various conflicts that have been going on here. But yet the mainstream media behaves as though President Trump was some sort of quisling or something like that. This Iranian deal, I mean, maybe your listeners or you guys can tell me something here that I don't know, but the Iran deal expires in just a few years. At that point, if Iran wants to build nuclear weapons, they have the legitimacy of the Iran deal to say that they can do it. Now, why would you ever enter into an agreement like that? Now, President Trump got us out of that. President Biden seems determined to get us back in again. So, but I'm just telling you that, what do you do if the agreement expires and Iran says we're going to build a nuclear weapon now, and the Iran agreement says we get to do it? What are you going to do? And I think that's the problem that President Trump was addressing. As far as America First goes, I think I should tell your listeners that I didn't have any trouble with this. The truth is that all 57 ambassadors at OSCE were representing their sovereign interests of their sovereign countries. That is the way the world works. There are 193 countries, and all the government officials and all the ambassadors are looking out for their country. But just because you're doing America First doesn't mean it's America alone. We can further American interests by working together with people like the United Kingdom and Germany and France and our allies in the Baltics and other people like that. And I did. And I might tell you guys that this was a Republican meeting, but the truth is that the absolute truth is that I conducted the ambassadorship in a completely bipartisan way, nonpartisan way, because I didn't represent a party. When I was governor, I was partisan as hell. I really was. But as an ambassador, I thought my duty was to represent all the people of the United States. And that's what I did over there in Vienna. And we had a great opportunity to be there. It's a great city. It was a wonderful residence. But the best part about it was my relationships with the other ambassadors.
Well, thank you very much. We didn't have a chance to talk about your Star Tour turn as RNC chairman, where you were a very effective partisan, setting in the foundations for the 2002 elections, which were very successful for the party. But we'll have to save that for another day. And so what's keeping you busy these days?
Well, I'm interested in trying to start to do some writing on what I've learned about foreign policy by being the ambassador in this big multinational security organization. So I'm going to try to do that. Then other than that, I'd like to do something to turn Virginia around. I mean, it's really embarrassing to have a national election where the Democrats are able to hold the Rust Belt. And, that's going to be debatable or combat going on. But Virginia and Georgia should not be voting Democrat.
Right.
So I'm going to try to help the party. I don't think it will be a candidate necessarily, but I'm going to try to help the party right the ship and see if we can't do the right thing for the people of Virginia and the people of the United States.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your joining and wish you well. And if you get that writing into a book, give us a holler, and we'll do a book event. Okay.
Okay, 1995 on Amazon. No, I'm just kidding. I'll get it written sooner or later. Thank you.
Thank you very much.